Hello, I am glad you are here, and I invite you to settle in as we explore a calm unfolding of the past. Let the pace be gentle, steady, and unhurried, as though we are walking through the dim corridors of an ancient fortress together, listening to the echoes of lives long gone but not forgotten. What follows is a quiet narrative about how medieval castle guards protected their fortresses at night, a slow-moving tapestry of stone walls, flickering torchlight, and the watchful routines that shaped the rhythms of life in the Middle Ages. In the deep hours after sunset, when the last glow of daylight sank below the battlements, a medieval castle shifted into a different world. The bustle of daily labor faded, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer stilled, and the dusty courtyards emptied as villagers returned to their homes beyond the outer walls. Yet the castle itself did not sleep. Its guardians stepped into their nightly duties with an awareness sharpened by centuries of conflict, tradition, and lived experience. They understood that the quiet darkness could conceal danger as easily as peace. Night guards began their work long before the gates closed. As the sky changed from gold to violet, the captain of the watch inspected every post along the walls. He checked the hinges of the heavy gates and the iron teeth of the portcullis. He confirmed that the drawbridge chains were free of wear and that the moat below had not been disturbed. These were tasks performed almost ritualistically, because a fortress was only as strong as its least maintained feature. A stiff hinge or a frayed rope could undo centuries of stonework and expose the entire household to peril. When the final travelers hurried across the bridge and the outer gate groaned shut, the castle sealed itself deliberately. The portcullis dropped with a rumbling thud, settling into place like a giant iron cone. Torches were lit along the battlements, their flames swaying in the gentle breeze that always seemed to whisper across high walls. The guards took their positions. Some paced along the wall walk, while others settled into the narrow guardrooms built into the thickness of the curtain walls. There they warmed their hands by small braziers, careful not to let the glow betray their position to anyone lurking in the darkness beyond. Most castles relied on a mixture of seasoned soldiers and less experienced retainers. Veterans of distant campaigns often served as night captains, men who recognized the sound of a dislodged stone or the faint creak of a cartwheel on a distant road. They could distinguish between the call of an owl and the whistle of a scout. They trained younger guards to trust their senses, for night duty demanded not only vigilance but intuition. A watchman could not simply stand and stare into the void. He had to listen, breathe, and notice subtle differences in the world around him. The uneven cadence of footsteps, the murmur of a distant conversation, or the sudden absence of wind could all hold meaning. Inside the keep, the household slept in relative safety, unaware of the steady rhythm of boots along the parapets. The great hall, so lively during the day, fell silent except for the occasional crackle of embers settling in the hearth. Servants who had tended fires and cleaned dishes now curled beneath coarse blankets. Children who had chased each other across the courtyard rested peacefully, dreaming of adventures without knowing that real danger sometimes lay just beyond the castle walls. Meanwhile, guards rotated through shifts to avoid fatigue. Medieval commanders understood that a tired guard was as dangerous as an unlocked gate. Some sat in waiting rooms deep within the gatehouse, ready to respond if the lookout signaled trouble. Others walked slowly along the top of the walls, scanning the moonlit landscape for any unusual movement. When clouds covered the moon, the darkness grew so complete that the guards relied on the faint silhouettes of trees, hills, and distant landmarks to orient themselves. It was said that seasoned watchmen could sense intruders not by sight, but by the way shadows shifted unnaturally. Every fortress had its own rhythm. In some, the bells in the chapel tower marked the hours, giving the guards a sense of time's passage. In others, only the steady flame of the torches kept them company. Some castles stood on high cliffs where the wind howled relentlessly. In those places, guards learned to brace themselves against the gusts, gripping their cloaks tight while keeping their balance along narrow stone passages. In lowland fortresses surrounded by fields or marshes, night brought the croaking of frogs, the rustle of reeds, and the distant bark of farm dogs. Each environment required its own form of awareness and shaped the nightly vigilance of its defenders. The routines of these guards were not born solely from fear. They were shaped by centuries of warfare, raids, and the memory of sieges that had tested every stone of every castle. To the people of the Middle Ages, threats could come from rival nobles, roving bands of brigands, or foreign armies. Night was when attackers hoped to exploit moments of weakness. Thus, a single inattentive moment on the part of a guard could be disastrous. Men who served on the night watch bore the weight of that responsibility, knowing that their alertness protected not only soldiers, but families, artisans, and travelers seeking refuge. At times the night was uneventful, filled with soft breezes and the soothing calm that settles over the world after dark. But even during peaceful times, guards worked with deliberate focus. They checked the locks on small postern doors hidden in the thick walls. They verified that supplies of stones, arrows, and other defensive materials were positioned near the battlements in case of sudden alarm. They ensured that torches had enough pitch to burn until dawn, and replaced those that sputtered out too quickly. Their vigilance made life within the fortress flow, with a sense of quiet security. As the hours passed, torches burned low, and the smell of heated iron and pine resin drifted across the ramparts. Guards warded off sleep by sharing quiet conversation, though they kept their voices low. Tales of distant lands, memories of former battles, or simple observations about the night helped them pass the time. Younger guards listened eagerly, absorbing the stories and advice of men who had seen much more of the world. Even in silence, the presence of a companion nearby gave comfort in the long darkness. They stood together beneath the slow drift of smoke rising from the torches, letting the night air carry the scent of the surrounding land into the fortress. Sometimes the air carried the sweetness of blooming heather or the earthy smell of wet soil after rain. Other times it held the crisp, sharp bite of winter frost. Guards learned to read these scents, not because they were poets by nature, but because every detail mattered. A sudden shift in the wind could hint at approaching riders or the distant burn of campfires not belonging to the castle's own people. Even the crackling of the torches could reveal changes in the moisture of the air, guiding the guards in predicting the weather and the challenges it might bring before dawn. As midnight approached, the castle often felt as though it were breathing in slow, deep rhythms. The weight of the stones held warmth from the day, releasing it gradually through the night, so that narrow passages within the walls seemed to exhale a gentle heat. The wooden beams of the towers creaked softly as they settled. Horses in the stable shifted in their stalls, snorting now and then, their instincts attuned to things humans might miss. Dogs kept near the inner courtyard stirred as well, sometimes rising suddenly with their noses pointed toward the outer gate, as if catching a scent too faint for ears or eyes to detect. Guards trusted these animals, knowing that their restless movements could signal something unusual. A dog's sudden growl, even if quiet, could send 2 or 3 watchmen to the battlements within moments. The guardrooms along the curtain walls were modest but essential. Some were no more than cramped alcoves where a single soldier could sit near a small brazier, sipping watered wine to stay warm. Others were larger, built into gatehouses or towers, with benches, barrels of arrows, hooks for cloaks, and niches for oil lamps. In many fortresses, the guardrooms had narrow slits for windows, allowing fresh air to sweep through without exposing the men inside. Guards often rested there during their rotations but never fully slept. Even in moments of calm, a watchman's sleep was shallow, easily broken by a footstep, a shout, or a horn blast. The castle horn was a vital instrument of night defense. Crafted from ox horn or forged from metal, it had a deep, resonant sound that could carry across fields, hills, and forests. Its notes varied in meaning. One long blast signaled the sighting of a distant threat. 2 rapid calls meant the guards had spotted movement near the walls. A series of short notes indicated immediate danger, and alerted the household to prepare for defense. Every person within the castle knew these signals by heart. Even children learned them, understanding instinctively that the horn was the voice of the walls themselves, speaking warnings in the language of necessity. Beyond the walls, the world was often darker and quieter. Many medieval castles were situated on hillsides or cliffs, giving their guards a wide view of the land below. On clear nights, they could see the faint glow of distant village fires or the silvery thread of rivers reflecting moonlight. They could see the outlines of forests, the shadows of grazing animals, and sometimes the glimmer of armored riders traveling along old Roman roads or newly worn trade paths. When they saw travelers passing by at night, the guards watched with silent curiosity. Most travelers avoided approaching castles after dusk, aware that doing so could easily be mistaken for hostile intent. Those who did approach were often halted long before they reached the gate, questioned from above by unseen voices echoing down from the battlements. If the travelers answered with trembling voices, explaining that they had lost their way or sought shelter from bandits, the guards faced a difficult judgment. Compassion urged them to open the postern door and lead the travelers inside, but caution warned against cunning enemies using such stories as deception. Many castles followed strict rules forbidding the opening of any gate after nightfall, unless the lord or captain of the guard gave explicit permission. In some places, travelers were allowed to sleep in the gate passage, locked securely between the portcullis and outer gate until dawn. It was a compromise that protected the fortress while offering limited shelter to strangers in need. Inside the walls, the routines of the night continued with quiet discipline. Guards in the gatehouse ensured that no one tampered with the chains controlling the drawbridge. They examined the mechanisms at regular intervals, testing each piece of timber and iron to ensure it was free of sabotage or decay. In castles where counterweights helped lift the bridge, these weights were inspected meticulously, because a single misalignment could leave the gatehouse vulnerable during an attack. The guards knew that the first assault of any siege would fall upon them, and they carried the burden of that knowledge with stoic acceptance. In towers, lookouts kept steady watch from narrow platforms wrapped with wooden or stone parapets. Their view extended farther than that of any other guard, and they became intimately familiar with the patterns of their surroundings. They noticed when a patch of forest seemed darker than usual, when a particular rock reflected moonlight in an unexpected way, or when the calls of night birds changed their rhythms. Lookouts were often chosen for their sharp vision and calm temperament. The solitude of the tower demanded a mind capable of patience, vigilance, and endurance. A lookout who allowed fear or boredom to distract him could endanger the entire castle. On some nights, fog rose from marshes or rivers, creeping toward the walls like a slow-moving veil. Fog made the watch especially challenging. Shapes blurred and sounds carried unpredictably, sometimes echoing strangely or muffling to near silence. Guards listened closely during such weather, relying heavily on their memory of the landscape. They studied the direction of the fog's movement, calculating how it might conceal approaching footsteps. Torches became unreliable, their flames sputtering in the dampness, forcing the guards to replace them more often or use lanterns enclosed in horn panels. Fog brought a quiet tension to the night, a sense of uncertainty that made every guard's senses sharpen involuntarily. When rain fell, the atmosphere changed completely. Water drummed against the tiled roofs and ran down the channels carved into stone walls. Cloaks soaked quickly despite their woolen fabric, and boots slipped against wet stone. Yet guards continued their patrols with practiced care, adjusting their movements to avoid accidents. They knew that a single damaged ankle or broken wrist could leave a section of the wall unguarded. Rain also masked sound, giving attackers the advantage of camouflage. For this reason, castle captains often doubled patrols during storms, ensuring that every corner of the fortress was watched even more closely than usual. Snow brought its own challenges. In deep winter, the battlements could be covered in white drifts that made walking treacherous. The cold seeped into bones and joints, making hands stiff and fingers slow. Guards huddled near braziers whenever they could, though they never stayed too long. Wary of becoming too comfortable, the stillness of winter nights was profound. Sounds traveled farther, and guards could sometimes hear wolves howling far beyond the outer fields. Yet the cold also meant that most enemies avoided travel, providing a small measure of comfort. Even so, vigilance was never abandoned. Within the deepest chambers of the keep, the lord of the castle slept with confidence in his guards. Lords relied upon these men not only for protection in war, but for stability in peace. A well-guarded castle became a center of trade, diplomacy, and community life. Merchants felt safer storing their goods nearby. Peasants sought protection behind the walls during times of uncertainty. The strength of the guard reflected directly upon the strength of the lord's rule. For this reason, many lords invested heavily in the training and well-being of their watchmen, ensuring they were fed, clothed, and armed properly. A guard who felt valued was far more likely to serve with loyalty. Training for night guards varied from region to region, but certain practices were common. Recruits learned how to move silently along stone passages, how to hold a torch high without letting its glow blind them, and how to adjust their eyes to low light. They practiced listening exercises, standing in darkness to identify distant sounds. They memorized every corner of the castle, from the main courtyards to hidden stairwells. They learned to light beacons quickly, to signal other towers with lanterns, and to rouse sleeping soldiers efficiently. Much of their knowledge came from older guards, passed down through quiet instruction rather than formal lessons. This mentorship created a bond across generations of watchmen, linking their experiences through shared duty. Night after night, season after season, the guards moved through their routines with calm dedication. Their presence ensured that life inside the fortress could unfold with confidence. People slept peacefully because they knew someone remained vigilant. Children grew up believing the walls were unbreakable, unaware of the constant effort required to maintain that illusion. Artisans worked, merchants traded, and travelers rested in safety thanks to the patient eyes of the guards who rarely received praise for their work. Their role was essential, yet often unseen, woven naturally into the fabric of castle life. As the night deepened, the men on watch sometimes found themselves reflecting on their own lives. They thought of families sleeping in nearby villages, of loved ones waiting for their return after a long shift. Some guards were married with children, balancing their duties with the needs of their households. Others were young and unmarried, dreaming of futures they hoped to build with coin earned from years of service. A few were older, nearing the end of their time as active watchmen, contemplating how many nights they had spent walking the ramparts. These thoughts drifted through their minds quietly, mingling with the stillness of the castle. Yet their focus never waned, and their responsibilities always took precedence. When disturbances did occur, they broke the tranquility like sudden storms. A distant clatter of stones might send guards rushing to investigate. A fleeting torchlight moving through the forest could prompt a horn signal. The appearance of unknown riders on the horizon required immediate attention. In some cases, these disturbances proved harmless, but the guards never assumed so. Vigilance demanded action, and hesitation could open the door to disaster. The men on watch understood the weight of this truth and carried it with discipline. As the long night pressed onward and the moon began its slow descent, the castle prepared for the quiet turning point before dawn. Birds stirred in distant trees, singing soft notes that signaled the coming day. The air shifted, its cold bite fading slightly as the first hints of light crept upward from the eastern horizon. Guards on the walls felt the change before they saw it, recognizing the subtle brightening of the sky. Dawn was not yet visible, but its presence could be sensed like a promise. Though dawn hovered unseen below the horizon, its slow arrival transformed the castle's atmosphere in subtle but unmistakable ways. The guards felt a faint loosening of the night's tension, not enough to relax their vigilance, but enough to alter the cadence of their breaths. The deep silence that had blanketed the fortress began to soften. The whisper of leaves in the surrounding woods shifted in tone, as if the trees themselves were preparing to greet the day. Even the torches, burning now with shortened stubs and wavering flames, seemed to flicker with a different rhythm, their light mingling with the earliest hints of pale illumination. Yet this period, just before dawn, was considered one of the most dangerous times for a castle. Every seasoned captain knew that attackers often sought to exploit the drowsiness that crept into even the most disciplined watch. Fatigue pressed hardest in these final hours, when bodies longed for rest and minds drifted. To counter this, the guard captains traditionally ordered a fresh rotation just before dawn. This practice brought alert eyes to the ramparts at the moment when vigilance was most important. Even the sound of boots stepping onto the stones with renewed energy created a sense of renewed readiness. The changing of the guard before dawn was a quiet but meaningful ritual. The men who had walked the walls for hours descended the stairwells with tired but steady steps. Their faces showed exhaustion, yet their pride in maintaining a peaceful night was unmistakable. As they passed those who replaced them, they exchanged brief nods or murmured words acknowledging the shared duty between them. No commendation was needed. Simply enduring the long darkness without incident was reward enough, a silent testament to their reliability. The fresh guards stepping into position felt a cool breeze brushing their faces. The first thing they did was scan the horizon. Although the landscape remained in deep shadow, faint outlines were becoming clearer. Hills gained definition. Trees emerged as clustering shapes rather than vague masses. The fields beyond the outer walls revealed the slightest glimmer of dew. These men waited carefully, watching for anything unusual. A lone figure moving across the field, a sudden shifting form near the tree line, or the rustle of underbrush, any of these could signal danger. The transition from night to dawn demanded heightened awareness. As the eastern sky grew gradually lighter, the castle began to stir from within. Servants woke in their quarters, rubbing sleep from their eyes as they prepared to begin their daily tasks. Some hurried to the kitchen, where fires were rekindled with fresh kindling. The smell of smoke drifted upward from the lower halls, reaching the battlements like a familiar greeting. Guards often felt comfort in this scent. It signaled that their long shift was nearing completion, and that they had successfully carried the fortress through the night's uncertainties. While dawn approached, the outer world remained calm. No unexpected riders appeared on the roads, and the forest held no signs of movement. The watchmen allowed themselves a slow, deep breath, appreciating the peacefulness of the moment. Yet even in this calm, their duties continued with precision. They checked the stones along the wall walk for signs of tampering, inspecting the mortar for cracks or loose pieces. They verified that the baskets of reserve arrows remained full, that the barrels of water set aside in case of fire were untouched, and that the small signal lanterns were still functional. Night may have passed without incident, but their work was never reactive alone. Prevention formed the core of their purpose. As the light grew stronger, the guards monitored the gatehouse carefully. Though the gates remained closed until full dawn, the area often attracted early laborers or farmers who needed to pass through. The guards listened for approaching footsteps or voices calling from beyond the walls. When the first silhouettes appeared, often shepherds leading their flocks or merchants eager to reach distant markets, the guards leaned forward slightly, studying their movements. They would wait until the captain of the watch gave the order to lift the portcullis, for no gate could open without his authority. Even during peaceful times, the protocol remained strict. Inside the inner bailey, the daily rhythm began to take shape. Stable hands fed the horses and emptied their water troughs, their movements accompanied by soft snorts and the stamping of hooves. Chickens scratched at the ground near the kitchens, searching for crumbs left behind from the previous evening. A blacksmith awakened the forge, striking flint against steel to coax the first sparks of the day. The steady rise of noise within the castle signaled the end of the guards, nocturnal solitude. For the watchmen, this moment always carried a subtle sense of transition. As dawn brightened, the world they had guarded so carefully took on color and life once more. Walls that had appeared shadowed and foreboding in the moonlight now gleamed softly. The banners atop the tower stirred with the breeze, their colors emerging clearly in the early sunlight. The guards themselves felt renewed, even if tired. The arrival of daylight offered reassurance that their efforts of the night had accomplished what they were meant to do. Yet the responsibilities of night guards were not solely tied to darkness. They also prepared reports detailing any unusual occurrences. Once relieved from duty, they gathered in the guardroom or gatehouse to review the night's events. If they had seen wandering lights in the distance, they described their direction and timing. If they had heard unfamiliar sounds, rustling near the moat or faint cries on the wind, they reported these meticulously. Even if nothing unusual had happened, the reports documented that the night passed in quiet. Written records were uncommon in some castles, but verbal accounts carried weight and were taken seriously. As the sun finally crested the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, the guards welcomed its arrival with a subtle sense of triumph. The fortress had endured another night without disorder. The Lord's household rose in safety. The walls had done their work, and in the hearts of the guards, there lingered the knowledge that they had fulfilled a vital role in preserving the peace of the realm. But beyond the simple routine, there existed deeper layers to the life of the night watch. Guards held countless stories within their memories, nights of storm, nights of battle, nights of eerie quiet that left even the most seasoned watchmen uneasy. Throughout the Middle Ages, the circumstances surrounding castle defense varied tremendously. Some castles stood in contested borderlands, where danger lurked constantly. Others existed in more peaceful regions, yet still upheld strict vigilance, for even the most tranquil lands could face sudden turmoil. In border fortresses, the guards learned to read the skies with uncanny accuracy. They could detect the faint glow of distant campfires belonging to enemy forces, even when those fires burned low. They could distinguish between the rumble of distant thunder and the faint roll of wagon wheels from across a valley. In such places, danger rarely slept, and the watchmen developed instincts that bordered on supernatural in their precision. Many of these men had witnessed raids firsthand, their memories holding the sights and sounds of attackers attempting to breach the walls under cover of night. Sometimes, the threat came not from human foes but from the natural world. Rivers could overflow during storms, threatening to flood the outer bailey. Strong winds could topple wooden hoardings or tear banners from poles. Lightning could strike the highest towers, setting fire to wooden roofs or creating cracks in stone battlements. Guards had to react swiftly to these dangers, rousing carpenters or laborers from their sleep to prevent disaster. Night watch demanded not only martial skill, but practical knowledge of the castle's architecture and its vulnerabilities. In times of siege, the night watch transformed entirely. Guards became soldiers in constant readiness, their shifts longer, their senses heightened. Every flicker of movement outside the walls demanded investigation. Food stores and water supplies needed protection from sabotage or contamination. Fires were forbidden on the ramparts to prevent enemy archers from spotting targets. Silence became essential. Even whispered conversations could carry across the still air and reveal the defenders' positions. Guards moved like shadows, communicating through gestures and prearranged signals. But even outside the context of war, the night held moments of quiet wonder. Guards often found themselves captivated by the beauty of the world around them. They watched stars arc across the sky, tracing constellations their fathers had shown them. They observed the moon in its many phases, thin crescent, half circle, full radiant orb, and noted how each phase changed the landscape. Under a full moon, fields shimmered faintly, and forests seemed alive with silver light. Under a new moon, the darkness descended so completely that even the nearest shapes dissolved into blackness. These observations were not merely poetic. The guards used the moonlight to judge visibility, estimating whether an approaching figure would be visible at a distance or hidden until dangerously close. In some regions, guards timed their patrol strategies around lunar cycles, increasing watchfulness on the darkest nights when visibility was lowest. They became, in essence, students of the night sky, using the heavens as their silent companions and guides. As the years passed, the guards' shared experiences forged deep bonds among them. They trained together, endured hardships together, and stood watch through countless nights. They learned to trust one another completely, for a guard's life often depended on the alertness of the man beside him. This camaraderie extended beyond duty. Guards celebrated births, mourned losses, and supported one another through difficult times. They formed an unspoken brotherhood shaped by the responsibilities they shared. Some guards remained in service for decades, their hair graying beneath their helmets. These elder watchmen became treasured for their wisdom. Younger recruits sought their guidance eagerly, learning not only the practical skills of keeping watch but the subtle art of reading the world beyond the walls. Older guards shared stories of past nights, some humorous, some unsettling, some full of hard-won lessons. These stories shaped the next generation, ensuring that the castle's defenses remained rooted in both tradition and adaptation. As daylight strengthened, the castle walls radiated warmth. The guards who had served through the night made their final rounds, checking once more the positions where torches had burned, ensuring no embers remained that could pose a fire risk. They secured the lanterns in storage cabinets carved into the stone walls. They brushed frost or dew from their cloaks and prepared to return to their quarters for rest. The moment the captain declared the night shift complete, the men descended the stairs with weary satisfaction. Yet even as they rested, new challenges awaited the next night. The rhythm of night watch never truly ended. It continued endlessly, shaped by the turning of seasons, the shifting of political tensions, and the constant uncertainties of medieval life. Every night brought the potential for unseen threats or unexpected events, and every night the guards stood ready. As the day unfolded and the sun climbed higher, the castle's daily routines overtook the stillness of dawn, but the night guards carried with them the quiet knowledge of what had transpired during the darkness. Their memories of the silent hours remained vivid even as laughter, hammering, and the clatter of hooves filled the courtyards once more. Yet what the daytime world seldom understood was that the guards' consciousness never fully abandoned the night. The experience of darkness shaped everything they did, influencing their judgments, their instincts, and their unspoken understanding of the castle's vulnerabilities. The fortress itself changed character when illuminated by the sun. The same walls that had seemed mysterious and imposing beneath the moon now appeared solid, familiar, and reassuring. But the guards knew that these stones held secrets that no sunlight could reveal. Within the narrow stairways, the winding passages, and the shadowed recesses of towers, the memory of night lingered. The day guards might walk confidently across the ramparts, but those who had patrolled in darkness understood how easily the world beyond could vanish into uncertainty. They recognized how crucial the night watch was in preserving the order that the daytime inhabitants took for granted. After resting for several hours, the night guards often gathered again in the late afternoon. Their conversations drifted naturally to subjects shaped by their nocturnal experiences, unusual sounds they had heard, glimpses of distant movement, or faint lights on the horizon. The guards analyzed these signs together, drawing upon their collective intuition to form a deeper understanding of their surroundings. This knowledge contributed to the evolving patterns of nightly vigilance, ensuring that every shift was informed by the lessons of the previous one. Different seasons brought different demands upon the nighttime defense. In spring, as thawed rivers swelled and fields grew soft with rain, the earth around the castle changed. Footsteps left clearer impressions in the soil, and guards trained themselves to study the ground by torchlight for signs of trespassing. They learned to differentiate between the tracks of deer, wandering livestock, and human visitors. Even the smell of the damp earth carried clues. They recognized the scent of fresh mud clinging to boots, the sharp tang of wet pine, and the distinct odor of trampled grass. In some regions, the arrival of spring also marked the start of campaigning season, when rival lords tested their strength and raiders grew bolder. The guards adapted accordingly, heightening their awareness and preparing for possibilities of unrest. Summer brought longer daylight hours, which shifted the timing of the night watch. The darkness grew shorter but heavier with heat. Warm nights often carried distant voices farther than expected, and the guards listened attentively for unfamiliar murmurs drifting from travelers, camps near the roads. The warmth also encouraged more activity outside the castle walls, merchants lingering on trade routes, farmers tending fields until late, and messengers riding through the night to deliver urgent news. Movement increased, and with it, the potential for confusion or misinterpretation. A guard's role became more complex, requiring careful judgment to distinguish harmless travelers from suspicious figures. The summer air also amplified the sounds of nature. Insects hummed loudly near torch flames. Frogs croaked in marshy areas. The wind rustling through thick foliage created soft but persistent whispers. The guards trained themselves to filter these natural sounds from genuine threats. They learned to recognize that a sudden silence among insects might signal the approach of a predator or a person. They understood that the flight of birds startled from treetops could signal movement beneath them. Night after night, these observations sharpened their senses until they could detect patterns that would be invisible to an untrained listener. Autumn changed everything once more. Leaves fell from the trees, revealing a landscape more open and exposed. Footsteps on dry leaves and brittle branches carried distinctly, making stealth more difficult for would-be intruders. Guards welcomed this advantage but remained aware that the winds of autumn could mask approaches with their incessant rustling. As the nights grew colder, fog returned more frequently, curling around the castle walls like a living presence. The guards learned to walk through this shifting mist without losing their bearings, using the feel of stone beneath their boots and the memory of each wall's shape to guide their patrols. In regions where autumn storms struck hard, thunder rattled the timbers of towers, and lightning flashed against the battlements with sudden ferocity. Guards braced themselves against the intensity of the weather, aware that nature's fury could hide an enemy's approach. Winter, however, remained the greatest test of the night watch. The cold pressed against the castle like an unrelenting force. Wind swept across the battlements, stinging exposed skin and numbing fingers. Snow built up on the wall walks, making each step a careful calculation. Guards wrapped themselves in heavy cloaks and fur-lined gloves, though even these offered limited protection against the deep chill of night. Yet winter also brought clarity. The moonlight reflected off snow-covered landscapes, enhancing visibility across great distances. Sounds carried sharply in the frozen air, and guards could often detect the crunch of distant footsteps long before they saw their source. Winter demanded fortitude, but it offered its own tools of defense. In the harshest winters, the castle took on an atmosphere of profound stillness. Ice formed along the edges of the moat. The drawbridge creaked under the weight of frost. Inside the keep, fires burned brighter and longer, casting warm light through narrow windows. But above, the guards continued their steady watch, their breaths forming mist that vanished into the night. Their dedication in such conditions became a mark of honor within the castle community. Those who braved winter's cold emerged in spring, with a reputation for exceptional endurance. Beyond the change of seasons, cultural and regional differences influenced how guards protected their fortresses at night. Castles in northern regions, where winters were longer and darker, developed unique strategies. They placed additional watchtowers on nearby hills to create extended lines of sight. They trained dogs specifically for nocturnal patrols, relying on their keen senses to detect intruders. They constructed double-layered walls with narrow corridors between them, allowing guards to move unseen while observing the outer defenses. In southern regions, where nights remained warm and insects thrived, Castles relied more on elevated watch points and lantern systems. Guards used covered lanterns with horn panes to reduce glare and prevent enemies from spotting their positions. Some castles donned color-coded lanterns to communicate signals between towers silently. Others trained falcons or owls to detect disturbances beyond the walls, using the bird's instincts as an extended form of surveillance. These methods varied widely, but each reflected the ingenuity shaped by local landscapes and traditions. In port cities or river fortresses, night defense extended onto the water. Guards patrolled docks and monitored moored vessels carefully, ensuring no one approached the castle's river gate. They watched for the movement of small boats, listening for the splash of oars or the clatter of hulls against rocks. Harbors were prone to smugglers, spies, and thieves, and the guards trained themselves to distinguish the legitimate midnight activities of fishermen from the shadowed maneuvers of those with darker intentions. Torches along the docks illuminated the water in shimmering bands, revealing silhouettes moving beneath the surface. Even water, calm and reflective, held secrets that the night guards were tasked to uncover. In mountain fortresses, night watch presented its own hazards. The air thinned at higher altitudes, making breaths short and patrols more taxing. Narrow cliff paths could crumble underfoot, and sudden rockfalls echoed through valleys with startling clarity. The wind whistled through high passes, creating eerie sounds that could unsettle even experienced guards. Yet these fortresses often had unparalleled views. On clear nights, the guards could see torches flickering along distant roads miles away, giving them a significant tactical advantage. They used fires in sheltered parapets to warm themselves and employed heavy leather screens to shield torches from gusts. In mountainous regions, vigilance meant not only watching for human threats, but respecting the terrain itself. Throughout medieval Europe, the structure of castle defense evolved over centuries, shaped by warfare, politics, and innovation. Guards had to adapt constantly to new technologies and new forms of threat. When crossbows became more common, guards modified their patrol strategies to avoid presenting easy targets. When trebuchets and siege towers posed new risks, castles strengthened their walls and built covered walkways. Guards learned the importance of listening for the faint sounds of engineers assembling siege engines in the dark. They recognized the distant clatter of wooden wheels, the creak of ropes under strain, and the rhythmic thudding of carpenters' mallets. These sounds signaled danger long before enemies came into view. As the Middle Ages progressed, some castles adopted more complex lighting systems. Instead of relying solely on open torches, they introduced lanterns mounted on swiveling iron brackets, allowing guards to redirect beams of light where needed. Some castles experimented with burning pitch in clay bowls, though this method produced thick smoke and strong odor. Others placed reflective metal plates behind lanterns to enhance their glow. The goal was to illuminate critical areas without revealing the guards' positions, a delicate balance that required skill and understanding. In addition to weapons and lighting, signaling methods advanced over time. Guards used coded lantern flashes, predetermined whistle patterns, and even mirrored surfaces to communicate across the battlements. In some places, horn calls were refined into intricate sequences that conveyed detailed information. A single long note might signify approaching riders. A long rise followed by a short fall could indicate a lone figure near the moat. 3 sharp blasts warned of attempts to sabotage the gate mechanisms. These signals allowed the guards to coordinate silently, ensuring that every tower and wall section remained connected even in darkness. But despite these innovations, the essence of night guard duty remained deeply human. It was shaped by perception, discipline, intuition, and cooperation. A guard learned to trust his instincts, but also to verify them. He learned to distinguish genuine threats from illusions cast by wind, shadow, or imagination. He learned to listen not only with his ears, but with his whole being. A castle's safety depended on the willingness of its guards to remain attentive even when fatigue pressed heavily upon them. One of the most challenging aspects of Night Watch was the psychological strain. Darkness altered the mind's perception of reality. Familiar shapes looked strange. Silence seemed too deep or too sudden. Guards occasionally experienced moments where uncertainty crept into their senses. Was that movement near the tree line real, or a trick of moonlight? Was that faint sound the rustle of an animal, or the cautious footstep of a lurking intruder? These questions required careful judgment. Guards learned to avoid jumping to conclusions, yet they also knew that dismissing concern too quickly could prove catastrophic. To combat such challenges, guards developed small rituals. Some hummed quietly to steady their nerves. Others whispered brief prayers as they passed particular sections of the wall where shadows lingered more heavily. Some pressed their palms against the stones, grounding themselves in the solidity of the fortress. These rituals did not diminish their professionalism. Rather, they helped maintain clarity in the face of the night's shifting uncertainties. Certain nights became legendary among guards. Nights when storms raged so fiercely that torches blew out and lightning cast fleeting, terrifying images across the battlements. Nights when owls circled overhead, their low calls echoing like omens. Nights when enemy scouts tested the defenses, creeping close enough that guards could hear their breathing before thwarting them with swift, decisive action. These stories circulated among the watchmen, passed down as reminders of what vigilance truly meant. One story that spread across many castles told of a night when a lone guard spotted a faint glimmer near the moat, just a brief reflection of moonlight on metal. He raised the alarm, and within moments the defenders discovered a group of raiders attempting to use grappling hooks to scale the western wall. The attackers were driven back thanks to the guards' sharp eyes. That single moment became an example repeated to new recruits for generations. It embodied the principle that every small observation mattered, that danger rarely announced itself loudly, and that a single attentive guard could save an entire fortress. Another tale spoke of a winter night when a thick fog enveloped a coastal castle. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the guards struggled to see even a few steps ahead. Yet one guard, listening intently, detected the nearly silent glide of rowboats moving toward the water gate. His quick action allowed the defenders to repel the intruders before they reached the walls. To this day, guards in certain regions use that story as a reminder of the importance of listening when the world offered no light. But not all stories involved danger. Some described moments of surprising beauty. Guards recalled nights when the northern lights shimmered across the sky, illuminating the world in ethereal colors. They spoke of summer nights filled with fireflies drifting across the fields like floating embers. They remembered nights when snow fell so silently that the entire castle seemed wrapped in a blanket of pure stillness. These moments offered solace, reminding the guards that their role connected them not only to threats, but to the natural rhythms of the world. The relationships between guards and animals formed another deeply rooted tradition. Dogs served not only as protectors, but as companions, easing the loneliness of long hours atop the walls. Horses, though housed in stables at night, provided subtle cues through their behavior, shifting restlessly when disturbances occurred outside. Even the birds that nested in the towers became indicators of unusual activity. When they startled awake or flew out unexpectedly, the guards paid attention, for birds reacted instinctively to movements that human senses might overlook. In some regions, guards formed bonds with ravens or crows that frequented the towers. These birds, drawn to the remnants of food or the shelter of high perches, sometimes behaved in ways that alerted guards to approaching figures. While the guards understood that birds were not intentionally helping them, the relationship became symbolic, a quiet partnership between man and nature. As the years passed, the traditions of the Night Watch became formalized. Castles developed rotation, schedules, training routines, and expectations that shaped the culture of the guardroom. New recruits learned not only skills but values: patience, attentiveness, resilience, cooperation. These values became the foundation of fortress defense. A castle might boast high walls and thick gates, but without disciplined guards, its strength remained hollow. The night watch gave the castle its true security. And as each night approached, the guards prepared once more. They donned their cloaks, adjusted their belts, checked their weapons, and lit their lanterns. They climbed the stairs to the battlements, returning to the familiar stones they knew so well. The world beyond the walls awaited them dark, uncertain, full of countless possibilities, and yet they faced it with steady calm, ready to protect those who slept beneath the fortress roof. As darkness returned once more and the sun dipped below the horizon, the castle entered a new phase of nightly vigilance. Yet every night was subtly different. No two evenings carried the same air, the same patterns of sound, the same temperament of wind. Guards learned to approach each night not as a repetition of the last, but as an unfolding moment that required renewed attentiveness. This mindset shaped the deeper culture of castle defense. For the men who guarded the walls understood that danger often arrived disguised as routine. As twilight settled, the landscape beyond the fortress shifted from clear detail to muted silhouette. The guards preparing for their nightly duties sensed this change immediately. The fading colors of sunset gave way to the muted blues and grays that signaled the beginning of true watchfulness. Before ascending the battlements, many guards gathered briefly in the armory, checking the condition of their equipment. They inspected the edges of their swords, ensured their scabbards were securely fastened, and confirmed that their lanterns contained fresh oil. Some tightened the straps of leather armor that had grown supple with use, while others wrapped woolen scarves around their necks to prepare for the night's cold. In some castles, the preparation involved more than simple inspection of weapons. Guards performed quiet rituals that connected them to the generations of watchmen before them. Some touched the hilt of a ceremonial sword displayed on the wall, believed to have been carried by the first captain of the castle's guard centuries earlier. Others dipped a cloth into a basin of clean water, pressing it lightly against their brow in a symbolic gesture of clarity and focus. These customs varied, but each carried meaning that transcended practicality. The rituals reminded the guards that their duties stretched beyond their own lives, that they were part of an unbroken chain of protection. As darkness deepened, new rhythms began to form. In some fortresses, musicians played soft notes on pipes or stringed instruments in the great hall, a final comfort for the household before sleep. The music drifted faintly through the corridors until the doors were closed and the melodies faded. Only then did the castle embrace the full silence of night, broken occasionally by the creak of timber or the distant call of an owl. The guards listened to these natural sounds, recognizing them as part of the environment they had learned to interpret. What many people today do not realize is that medieval night guards developed a sophisticated understanding of acoustics long before the science itself was formalized. They understood how sound traveled across open fields or echoed between stone walls. They knew that on cold nights, voices carried farther. On humid nights, sound became muffled. On windy nights, the direction of the breeze could distort a noise or carry it unexpectedly across the battlements. Guards learned these nuances through experience, observing how a distant conversation carried differently depending on the weather or the terrain. Their ears became finely tuned instruments, capable of detecting shifts that most people would overlook entirely. To enhance their perception, some guards positioned wooden bowls filled with water at strategic points along the walls. The still surface of the water could ripple at the faintest vibration, alerting a guard to movement nearby even if sound or sight failed. This simple technique proved invaluable in quiet conditions, especially when the night was so still that even careful footsteps might go unnoticed. The guards watched the dark, glossy surface of these bowls, scanning for any tremor that might indicate a disturbance. In addition to sensory vigilance, guards closely monitored the behavioral patterns of animals in the surrounding area. Horses in the stable often raised their heads or stamped their hooves when they sensed unfamiliar movement outside the walls. Dogs stationed in the outer courtyard reacted to scents carried by the wind, their noses twitching long before their ears picked up any sound. Even the ravens that nested in the towers provided clues, when they shifted restlessly or flew out unexpectedly during the night. The guards prepared for the possibility of approaching riders or lurking enemies. Nighttime defense sometimes expanded beyond the walls. Certain castles employed roving patrols known as night riders. These mounted guards ventured along predetermined paths surrounding the fortress, carrying covered lanterns that emitted narrow beams of light. Their goal was to detect potential threats before they reached the moat or the gatehouse. Night riders relied heavily on their horses, trusting their instincts to detect disturbances hidden by darkness. The riders moved with deliberate stealth, avoiding unnecessary noise while maintaining constant awareness of their surroundings. The presence of night riders added an additional layer of complexity to castle defense. Their safety depended on coordination with the guards on the walls. When a night rider approached the castle after completing a patrol, he signaled his identity with a particular rhythm of hoofbeats or a specific whistle learned by the watchman. Without such signals, he risked being mistaken for an enemy. These codes were sometimes changed weekly or even nightly to prevent infiltration by hostile forces who might attempt to mimic them. Within the walls, internal security remained equally important. Not all threats came from the outside. Guards patrolled corridors, storerooms, and stairwells to ensure that no unauthorized person wandered through the keep at night. Castles often housed prisoners in lower chambers, and guards checked these cells regularly. Some castles used trained dogs for internal patrols, their heightened senses detecting intruders more effectively than humans could. Guards also inspected the storage rooms for grain, wine, and weaponry, ensuring nothing was stolen or tampered with. Internal patrols complemented the external ones, forming a complete protective network. Another fascinating aspect of night defense involved the use of light and shadow as tools. Guards understood that too much illumination could reveal their positions, while too little left them vulnerable to stealthy threats. As a result, they developed strategies for managing light carefully. Torches were placed at intervals along the walls to create alternating zones of brightness and darkness. Guards moved primarily within the shadows, keeping themselves hidden while observing illuminated areas more safely. In some castles, windows were fitted with wooden shutters that could be adjusted to control the amount of light escaping from within. This approach allowed the guards to manipulate visibility in ways that benefited defense. Guards also practiced techniques to preserve their night vision. They avoided looking directly into flames and shielded their eyes when entering brightly lit areas. When transitioning from light to darkness, they paused briefly to allow their eyes to adjust. These simple practices enabled them to see more effectively in dim conditions, strengthening their ability to detect movement or unusual shapes beyond the walls. The nightly activities of guards varied depending on the castle's location and the region's political climate. Some fortresses existed in territories frequently contested by rival factions. In these places, guards remained in a constant state of readiness, knowing that attacks could occur at any moment. The sound of distant horns or the sudden flicker of enemy torches on nearby hills set entire garrisons into motion. Guards used signal fires to communicate with neighboring castles or fortified towns, sending coded messages through patterns of flames. A sequence of 2 quick bursts followed by 1 long burn might indicate the approach of enemy forces. A steady high flame might signify urgent need for reinforcements. These signal systems created a network of communication that connected multiple strongholds across vast distances. In more peaceful regions, the threats were different but no less significant. Thieves sometimes attempted to breach the walls under cover of night, hopping to steal supplies, livestock, or valuables. Outlaws or deserters sought entry to claim refuge, posing risks that guards had to assess carefully. The presence of wild animals also presented challenges. Wolves roamed near forests, occasionally drawn to the smell of food from the castle's refuse pits. In such instances, guards took measures to ensure that no livestock was harmed and that the wolves did not approach too close to the walls. In some regions, large cats such as lynxes or leopards posed similar risks. The presence of supernatural beliefs added another dimension to Night Watch. In many regions, guards grew up hearing stories of restless spirits, wandering ghosts, or creatures believed to lurk in forests and abandoned ruins. While few guards gave serious credence to such tales, they could not completely ignore them. On fog-shrouded nights or in deep winter when the wind howled with mournful intensity, even seasoned watchmen occasionally felt a twinge of unease. Stories of supernatural encounters circulated quietly among the guards, often told in hushed tones during moments of rest. These tales served as both entertainment and caution, reinforcing the idea that the night held mysteries beyond the reach of complete understanding. Regardless of personal beliefs, guards maintained their focus through discipline and training. Many castles incorporated psychological preparedness into their instruction. Recruits learned to steady their breathing when fear threatened to overtake them. They learned how to analyze unusual sights logically rather than jumping to conclusions. This mental resilience proved as important as physical strength or weapon skill. A guard who allowed fear or imagination to cloud his judgment could easily misinterpret danger or overlook genuine threats. Cultural identity played a significant role in shaping Night Watch practices. In regions influenced by Norse traditions, guards drew upon a history of seafaring vigilance. They learned to evaluate distant lights with precision and to interpret the movement of clouds across the moon with an understanding shaped by centuries of maritime observation. In lands influenced by Byzantine customs, guards inherited sophisticated surveillance techniques passed down from ancient military treatises. These methods included structured patrol patterns, observation rotations, and specialized signaling protocols. In territories shaped by Arabic traditions, guards benefited from advanced knowledge of astronomy and geometry, allowing them to calculate distances and directions more accurately at night. One lesser-known aspect of castle defense involved the architectural design of watchtowers specifically optimized for night guard duties. Some towers contained sound channels, narrow shafts that amplified faint noises from the surrounding landscape. Others incorporated angled viewing slits that allowed guards to observe large areas without exposing themselves to enemy archers. The placement of towers often followed strategic principles based on sightlines, enabling overlapping fields of view across the entire perimeter. This design ensured that no blind corners existed where intruders could hide. Within the towers, guards sometimes maintained manuscripts containing observations recorded over months or even years. These documents noted seasonal patterns, the frequency of animal movements, the behavior of nearby villages, and occurrences of suspicious activity. While not all castles maintained such records, those that did possessed valuable repositories of knowledge that informed the training of new guards and improved defensive strategies over time. During particularly tense periods, guards reinforced their routines with additional precautions. They placed sharpened stakes along vulnerable sections of the moat. They scattered pebbles or dried leaves across hidden footpaths, listening for the distinct crunch that signaled approaching feet. They suspended small metal bells from branches near the tree line to detect disturbances caused by intruders. These methods were simple but effective, used for generations to protect castles from stealthy infiltration. Some nighttime dangers arose from the sky rather than the earth. Archers firing flaming arrows posed a threat that required immediate response. Guards stationed on roofs and courtyards kept buckets of water and sand ready to extinguish fires before they spread. They trained extensively in fire management, knowing that even a small blaze could jeopardize the entire fortress. During windy nights, the risk increased significantly, and guards remained on high alert for any sign of embers drifting through the air. In certain regions, guards practiced techniques for fighting in low light. They trained to move quietly in armor, to strike accurately without clear sight, and to defend themselves against attackers emerging suddenly from the shadows. These skills required immense discipline. Training sessions often took place at dusk, allowing recruits to adapt gradually to the challenges of diminished visibility. Experience taught them to rely on their sense of hearing and touch, to predict movements based on subtle cues, and to fight with efficiency rather than brute force. Yet not every challenge of the night came from threats. Some arose from the simple burden of time. Long hours of standing or walking weighed heavily on the men. The mind wandered. The body grew weary. Guards developed methods to combat monotony and maintain alertness. Some recited verses or prayers. Others traced patterns on the stone walls with their gloved fingers. Some quietly counted their steps or named constellations overhead. These small acts helped pass the hours while keeping the mind anchored in the present. Companionship played an essential role in sustaining morale. Guards rarely patrolled alone unless necessary. Pairs or small groups moved together, exchanging soft observations or brief signals. Even silence felt different when shared. A guard walking alone might feel the weight of the night pressing upon him, but with another nearby, the darkness seemed less oppressive. This camaraderie formed the foundation of trust within the watch. The deeper layers of night life within a castle extended even into spiritual dimensions. In many regions, chapels remained illuminated by a single candle throughout the night, symbolizing divine protection. Guards sometimes visited these chapels before beginning their shifts, standing quietly before the altar for a moment of reflection. Whether motivated by faith or simple tradition, these rituals offered a sense of grounding. Some castles appointed chaplains who blessed the guards as they prepared for their duties, acknowledging the risks they faced and the importance of their role. As the night advanced toward its quietest hour, the castle often appeared suspended in a state between wakefulness and sleep. The steady flame of torches created wavering shadows on the walls. The gentle movement of cloaks in the wind produced soft rustles. The distant hoot of an owl seemed magnified in the stillness. Guards moved carefully, knowing that even their footsteps could seem loud in such silence. Yet they also understood that these moments were among the most crucial of the night. The world seemed to hold its breath, and within that breath, threats, if present, often revealed themselves. When the moon traveled past its highest point and began its descent, the transition into the second half of the night brought a subtle shift in mood. Fatigue became more pronounced. Muscles ached. Eyes grew heavy. Guards rotated positions to ensure no one remained in a single location for too long. The fresh air of the parapets helped keep them alert, but the danger of drowsiness lingered. Experienced captains recognized this and introduced brief intervals during which guards performed simple physical tasks, stretching, walking briskly, or climbing a short flight of steps to increase circulation. These practices kept the men alert without compromising their focus. In some castles, small braziers burned along sheltered portions of the walls, providing pockets of warmth where guards could briefly rest their hands. These braziers were placed carefully, so their light did not reveal the guards' positions to outsiders. Even the glow of embers was shielded behind stone screens or wooden barriers. Guards approached these braziers only briefly, mindful of the need to maintain darkness-friendly vision. Yet even these measures could not prevent the inevitable challenges posed by long nights. The mind sometimes played tricks, detecting movement where none existed or imagining sounds carried only by memory. Seasoned guards recognized these illusions and steadied themselves. They practiced grounding techniques, focusing on the feel of the stone beneath their boots or the rhythm of their breathing. These small actions kept them connected to the present moment, reducing the chance of confusion. When disturbances did arise, they often came with little warning. A sudden cry from the outer fields, the unexpected flare of torchlight on a distant road, the snap of a twig near the moat. Guards reacted immediately, signaling their companions with prearranged gestures or sounds. They positioned themselves advantageously, pressing their backs against solid stone or crouching behind merlins. The next moments required calm analysis. Was the sound human or animal? Was the light a traveler or an enemy? Guards combined their collective senses to make quick, effective decisions, drawing upon training and instinct alike. In the event of confirmed danger, the entire castle mobilized with remarkable speed. Horns sounded, gates were reinforced, arrows were prepared. Armored soldiers rushed from their barracks to stand beside the guards. The coordinated response reflected the intricate organization of medieval fortification. Every person within the castle, from the lowest servant to the highest noble, had a designated role. The guards held the front line, defending the walls and gathering information to pass to commanders. But even on nights devoid of threat, the importance of the guards' presence remained unquestioned. They maintained the illusion of absolute safety that allowed the castle's inhabitants to sleep, work, and live without fear. Their steady footsteps upon the walls became a part of the fortress's very identity, a constant reminder that vigilance shaped the foundation of medieval security. Through the centuries, as kingdoms rose and fell, as warfare changed, and as castles evolved into ruins or museums, the memory of these guards endured. Their nightly vigilance became a symbol of resilience, discipline, and unwavering duty. Each night they stepped into darkness with the same quiet determination, carrying forward traditions older than many of the walls they patrolled. And so, as another night settled upon the ancient stones, the guards prepared once more, ready to face whatever the darkness concealed, ready to preserve the peace within, ready to stand watch until the first light of dawn revealed the world anew. As the night deepened once more, and the torches along the battlements flickered in the faint breeze, the castle entered a period that guards quietly referred to as the true heart of darkness. This was not a poetic expression, but an observation formed through years of experience. The hours between midnight and the early approach of dawn were the most unpredictable in every season and every region. During this time, the world beyond the walls seemed to hold its secrets more tightly, concealing movements, muffling sounds, and twisting the ordinary into shadows of uncertainty. Even the most seasoned guards felt these hours settle upon them like a heavy cloak, demanding the full measure of their discipline. But the men did not shrink from this challenge. Instead, they stepped into their duties with an understanding built from countless nights of quiet endurance. They knew that protecting the fortress at night required far more than observation alone. It required interpretation. It required the ability to notice patterns and breakages in those patterns. It required the capacity to detect the subtle transition between the normal rhythm of a quiet night and the faint tremor that hinted at a coming disturbance. And because the guards lived in tune with these cycles, they recognized details that others would never see. One of the lesser-known elements of medieval night defense involved the careful study of air currents. Guards learned that shifts in wind direction sometimes preceded the arrival of riders or marching soldiers. The air carried scents that traveled ahead of movement, long before the source became visible. A faint whiff of stirred dust or distant sweat could signal horses approaching at speed. The smell of damp straw could indicate a group of travelers sheltering in a hollow. Smoke drifting unexpectedly in the night might reveal a campfire being concealed behind earthworks or hills. These observations became part of the guards' nightly calculations, contributing to the quiet mental maps they constructed of the world beyond the walls. In certain castles, guards marked the wind direction with small cloth streamers tied to poles along the battlements. These strips fluttered softly, revealing subtle changes in airflow. Guards watched them closely, comparing their movement with the natural patterns they had memorized. If the cloth suddenly shifted in an unusual manner, they approached the wall's edge to examine the source. This simple tool, combined with keen perception, formed a powerful method of early detection. Another practice involved the observation of tree movement. Trees, especially those near the outer perimeter, acted as silent sentinels, swaying gently under the influence of wind or animal activity. But when their movement changed unexpectedly, guards noticed. A branch bending too sharply against the direction of wind could indicate someone moving through the trees. The sudden flutter of leaves in an otherwise still grove might signal a hidden presence. Even the silhouettes of treetops could offer clues. Guards who had spent years watching the same trees night after night recognized when their shapes shifted in ways that suggested climbing or disturbance. Some castles maintained open viewing platforms specifically designed for nighttime scanning of the horizon. These platforms provided a panoramic vantage point that allowed guards to watch for distant fires, moving lights, or silhouettes shifting along the skyline. In many cases, the guards used these platforms to monitor the routes that approached the castle from multiple directions. They noted the timing of caravans, the regularity of merchant travel, the pattern of local shepherds guiding their flocks, and the lights of nearby villages. Through this constant study, they gained an intimate understanding of what belonged in the landscape and what did not. The importance of familiarity with the surrounding land cannot be overstated. A guard who knew the contours of hills, the location of streams, or the bend of a road could detect anomalies instantly. A misplaced shadow on a familiar ridge, a new disturbance in a spot that usually remained calm, a faint glimmer where no reflection should have appeared. These small irregularities could signal the approach of danger. Inside the castle, while the night patrols maintained the exterior vigilance, another group of guards ensured that the keep and its inner chambers remained secure. These guards moved quietly through hallways lit only by the dim glow of lanterns. They checked the locks of storerooms, ensuring that none had been tampered with. They verified that the armory remained sealed and that the training yard gates were closed. They passed through the servants' quarters, listening for unusual sounds that might indicate unauthorized movement or distress. Some castles kept valuable documents in dedicated chambers overseen by scribes or clerks. These rooms contained correspondence, records of land holdings, and details of alliances. Night guards ensured these rooms remained untouched, their doors bolted and sealed. In times of tension or political intrigue, the protection of such records became as significant as the protection of the walls themselves. The deeper sections of certain castles contained subterranean passages, often used for storage, water access, or communication with nearby outposts. Night guards patrolled these passages as well, bearing lanterns whose light cast long, wavering shadows across the stone. Underground patrols required steady nerves. The sound of dripping water echoed through the tunnels. The walls absorbed and distorted noise, making it difficult to determine direction. Guards accustomed to these environments developed refined listening skills, learning to distinguish between natural echoes and unfamiliar sounds. In some fortresses, hidden escape tunnels existed beneath the walls. These secret passages, known only to a few, provided a last resort during times of siege. Because their secrecy was essential, guards assigned to their protection were carefully chosen for loyalty and discretion. They checked the entrances nightly, ensuring the locks remained engaged and that the stones surrounding the concealed doors showed no signs of tampering. Such vigilance ensured that these strategic tunnels never became vulnerabilities exploited by enemies. Within the watchtowers, guards kept detailed night logs. These logs contained brief entries noting strange noises, lights seen from afar, wildlife activity, weather changes, or sightings of travelers. Though the entries were sparse, they served an important purpose. They allowed the captain of the guard to review patterns over time, identifying recurring events or suspicious behavior. If lights appeared on a distant ridge at the same hour for several nights, the guards took special notice. If footsteps were heard near the moat without corresponding signs of wildlife, patrols were increased in that region. These night logs also preserved a subtle form of communication between different shifts. Guards who finished their watch wrote notes for those who replaced them. These messages helped maintain continuity, ensuring that each guard began their shift armed with the knowledge of what had transpired earlier. Even a brief mention, such as the mention of a lone rider on the western road or a fox crossing the fields, contributed to the cumulative understanding of the knight's character. In many castles, the architecture deliberately supported nighttime defense. Narrow corridors allowed guards to move unseen between key areas. Arrow slits were angled to maximize visibility while minimizing exposure. Gatehouses contained multiple layers of defense mechanisms, portcullises, murder holes, and heavy wooden doors reinforced with iron. Guards remained intimately familiar with each of these features. Their nightly patrols included inspection of every gate mechanism. They checked the chains for signs of rust, the hinges for wear, and the winches for proper tension. A malfunctioning gate posed a serious threat, for even a momentary difficulty in lowering a portcullis could give attackers an opportunity to breach the entrance. One unusual yet essential component of castle night defense involved the calculated use of silence. Guards trained themselves to walk with soft steps, placing their boots carefully to avoid noise. They kept their equipment secured so that metal buckles or tools did not clink. They communicated with subtle gestures when possible. Silence served as both a shield and a weapon. It allowed guards to hear faint disturbances and prevented enemies from gauging their positions. Silence in the hands of skilled watchmen became a strategic advantage. The social dynamics of night guard duty were shaped by this quiet, creating an atmosphere distinct from the daytime world. Bonds formed through shared silence, shared vigilance, shared encounters with the unknown. Guards learned to read one another's expressions in dim light, sensing when a companion felt uneasy or when focus wavered. They supported each other with unspoken understanding, strengthening their ability to face the darkness as a cohesive unit. Some castles employed a special role known in certain regions as the night listener. This guard, often chosen for his acute hearing, positioned himself in a chamber designed to amplify external sounds through carefully crafted openings in the stone. These chambers functioned as early acoustic surveillance rooms, allowing faint noises to reach the listener's ears with remarkable clarity. The night listener remained seated in near darkness, head tilted slightly, concentrating on the faintest hints of disturbance. When he detected something unusual, he alerted the other guards through soft knocks along a wooden beam that transmitted signals throughout the tower. This system allowed the garrison to react swiftly to distant threats long before they reached the walls. Beyond the walls, the night riders who circled the outer lands played a vital role in the broader defensive strategy. Their patrol routes often followed old hunting paths or boundaries marked by ancient stones. In some regions, these riders passed shrines or markers believed to hold protective significance. Though some viewed these sites as spiritual refuges, others saw them simply as waypoints. Regardless, the riders learned to navigate these landscapes by memory, even in complete darkness. They memorized the distances between landmarks, the angles of hills, and the routes where hoofbeats resonated differently. Such familiarity ensured they could operate safely even when moonlight was scarce. Night riders often carried small bags containing essentials, dried meat, flint, water, and occasionally herbs used to sharpen alertness. They were trained to remain silent for long stretches, communicating only when necessary. Their horses, too, were selected for temperament and endurance, capable of moving quietly across varied terrain. These patrols extended the castle's senses far beyond its walls, forming a living perimeter that shifted with the night's needs. At times, the night riders encountered travelers who had lost their way or merchants who had misjudged the distance between settlements. The riders assessed these individuals carefully, offering guidance or escort when appropriate. But caution governed every decision. A lone traveler could be honest, or could be a scout gathering intelligence. The night riders balanced empathy with vigilance, embodying the delicate equilibrium that defined medieval defense. The psychological landscape of the night varied greatly depending on circumstances. During times of peace, the night often held an air of quiet reflection. Guards found themselves savoring the beauty of moonlit fields, the gentle hum of insects, or the rhythmic sway of banners in the wind. But in times of war, the same darkness became charged with tension. Every sound seemed sharper, every shadow more suspect. Guards breathed more slowly, moved more deliberately, and sensed danger even when none appeared. The night taught them to live in two worlds simultaneously, the world of calm and the world of imminent threat. Throughout the Middle Ages, the duties of night guards evolved alongside changes in technology and warfare. The introduction of improved lantern designs allowed for more controlled light. Advances in weaponry prompted new defensive techniques. Changes in armor influenced how guards moved and fought. But even as these practical aspects shifted, the core principles of night defense, vigilance, awareness, coordination, discipline, remained constant. Yet one of the most fascinating aspects of night guarding came from the guards' accumulated wisdom. This wisdom blended practical experience with deep intuition, forming a kind of knowledge that could not be taught through formal instruction. It arose from countless encounters with darkness, countless nights of listening and watching, countless moments of uncertainty resolved through careful observation. Guards developed an almost instinctual sense of when something felt wrong, even before clear evidence emerged. This intuition, honed over years, sometimes prevented disaster. Many generations later, historians would marvel at the subtlety and sophistication of medieval night defense. They would analyze the architecture, strategies, and technologies. They would study the social and military structures that shaped these practices. But what they could not fully capture was the lived experience of the guards themselves, the smell of the night air, the quiet weight of the darkness, the constant readiness that defined their existence. As the night continued its slow progression and the stars moved overhead, the guards remained steadfast. They paced their familiar routes, scanned the distant fields, listened for sounds carried across the wind. They noted the position of the moon, the movement of the clouds, the shifting texture of the air. Their presence formed the invisible shield that allowed life within the fortress to unfold without fear. And so, with steady hearts and watchful eyes, they guarded the sleeping world once more. As the hours passed and the night drew deeper into its quiet core, the guards felt themselves sinking into the steady rhythm that only the most seasoned watchmen truly understood. The castle existed in a suspended state, holding its breath in the fragile stillness between dusk and dawn. The air was cool against the stone, and each tower cast long shadows that reached across the baileys like dark fingers. The world beyond the walls lay wrapped in darkness, shifting gently beneath the slow march of time. For the guards, this was not simply a moment to endure, but a landscape to navigate with careful intention. The long familiarity they had with the fortress shaped everything they did. Each guard knew the sound of every hinge, the creak of every wooden beam, the echo of each footstep along the battlements. They could walk the perimeter blindfolded if necessary, guided by instinct and memory alone. This deep connection to the physical structure of the castle gave their movements an ease that belied the complexity of night defense. They did not merely patrol the walls, they understood them. They read the vibrations of the stones, the whispers of the wind, the faintest movements beyond the moat. Their deep knowledge extended equally to the residents of the castle. Guards could distinguish the footfall of a cook, rising early from the heavy tread of a blacksmith checking his forge at unusual hours. They recognized the soft rustle of servants preparing the kitchens for dawn and knew instantly when footsteps did not belong to anyone expected to be awake. Within this enclosed world, the guards became silent overseers, preserving order through awareness alone. Even the great hall played a part in the nightly rhythm. Long after its fires dimmed and its occupants retired to their chambers, the hall held onto the heat of the day. The warmth seeped through stone corridors and drifted toward the guard rooms, offering brief comfort to men stepping inside to rest weary hands by smoldering braziers. The scent of roasted meat, spilled ale, and burnt wood lingered faintly, creating an atmosphere that reminded the guards of the people they protected with each silent step along the battlements. Different castles carried their own stories in the night. Some perched atop windswept cliffs where the sea crashed below in endless rhythm. These sea castles had their own unique challenges. At night, the waves boomed against the rocks, generating a deep, rolling sound that masked the footsteps of intruders. The guards learned to distinguish between natural wind gusts and the faint splash of a boat's oars. The scent of salt hung on the air, and seabirds called out in the darkness. If ships approached unseen, the guards relied on lookout towers built high above the surf, where lanterns could scan wide expanses of water. Other castles stood in thick forests where night gathered heavily beneath overlapping branches. Forest castles required guards to understand the language of woodland creatures. The sudden quieting of insects, the abrupt flutter of birds lifting into the air, the snap of a twig beneath careful feet. Each of these offered clues to the presence of intruders. In such locations, the guards kept dogs at the ready, trusting their ears and noses to detect movement among the undergrowth. Forest nights held their own secrets, and the guards accepted their role as the interpreters of the darkness. In regions where castles overlooked trade routes, the guards became observers of human activity as much as natural movements. Merchants often traveled during the night to avoid heat or bandits, and guards developed a keen sense of how to identify legitimate caravans from suspicious gatherings. The faint glimmer of torchlight along a road could reveal whether a small group of travelers approached or whether a larger force moved with strategic concealment. The guards watched these lights carefully, noting the rhythm of their movement, the spacing between them, and the shadows they cast on the ground. The watchmen also learned to evaluate silence itself. A sudden absence of sound often meant more than noise. In the countryside surrounding a castle, the night had its usual chorus: frogs croaking, crickets chirping, distant livestock shifting in their pens. When this chorus abruptly quieted, the guards tensed. Silence hinted at disturbance, as if the natural world sensed something the human eye could not yet see. The guards leaned forward along the battlements, eyes straining to read the darkness for confirmation. In fortified towns attached to castle complexes, the guards' responsibilities included monitoring not only the outer perimeter, but the movements of townspeople who lived within the walls. Taverns often housed late activity, and guards learned to distinguish between harmless revelry and conversations tinged with danger. They kept watch over the streets, ensuring that gamblers, traders, and wanderers did not cause trouble that might escalate into conflict. In winter, when the streets grew quiet early, guards checked doorways for figures seeking shelter and ensured that no fires burned unattended in the wooden structures that crowded the town's interior. Within the keep, the Lord's chambers required constant protection. Guards stationed near the Lord's door remained alert through each hour, shifting positions only when relieved. These guards listened for unusual noises within the corridor and monitored the staircases that led to the upper levels. Their role extended beyond mere protection of a single individual. The safety of the Lord maintained the stability of the entire household. Should anything happen to the leader, the ripple of disorder would spread quickly. In some castles, elite guards known as household knights took the place of regular watchmen in the keep. These individuals had undergone extensive training and held the trust of their lord. At night, they listened to the stillness with refined awareness, understanding that political enemies could be as dangerous as foreign invaders. In times of courtly intrigue, the night within the keep held layers of tension that extended far beyond the battlements. Despite the heaviness of their tasks, the guards found ways to endure the long hours. Some hummed softly as they walked, creating a steady rhythm that kept their minds alert. Others recited stories passed down through generations, repeating them silently with each step. A few gazed up at the stars, tracing constellations that guided travelers and sailors alike. These simple acts helped maintain their concentration. The stars themselves provided another form of navigation for night guards. In some regions, guards could tell the time by observing specific constellations' positions. They knew when the plow dipped close to the horizon, when Orion's belt pointed toward dawn, when certain stars rose or fell according to the season. These celestial markers guided not only timekeeping but confidence. If clouds obscured the sky on a stormy night, the guards understood their surroundings instinctively. But on clear nights, the stars offered reassurance, steadying the mind and anchoring the guards in a vast, familiar sky. Each night held lessons that guards carried with them long after sunrise. A faint breeze that shifted unexpectedly might remind them of a distant scouting party they intercepted years earlier. A particular owl's call could bring to mind a night when bandits attempted to scale the walls. The memories woven into the darkness informed every decision, enriching their understanding of what to expect, or what not to expect, from the unseen world beyond the walls. Though the guards' work was quiet, it deeply influenced the castle's overall strength. A fortress might boast thick walls and tall towers, but without vigilant watchmen, those defenses were nothing more than stone. The guards transformed the castle from a passive structure into a living entity, one capable of responding to threats with speed and coordination. Their presence allowed those inside to sleep soundly, unaware of the subtle tensions and decisions that shaped the night. On some nights, the influence of the moon determined everything. A full moon cast shadows so sharp that the world appeared almost bright. The guards could see far across the fields, detecting the movement of every animal. On such nights, enemies avoided approaching, aware that the guards could spot them easily. But on nights when the moon vanished entirely, darkness gathered like a curtain, thick and impenetrable. These moonless nights demanded the utmost focus, pushing even experienced guards to rely on sound and intuition more than sight. The return of fog altered the castle's atmosphere entirely. Fog wrapped around the towers and flowed through the battlements, swallowing torchlight and distorting the world into a shifting blur. Guards stepped carefully, relying on the feel of the stones beneath their boots. They listened with heightened awareness, focusing on the faintest of sounds. The normal boundaries of space dissolved in the mist, and guards sometimes felt as though they were walking through a dream. But they pushed through this uncertainty, for they knew that fog often sheltered intruders. Storms demanded a different kind of vigilance. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating distant ridges for the briefest of moments, offering guards fleeting glimpses of the terrain. Thunder rattled the walls, shaking loose dust from old timbers. Rain hammered the battlements, turning stone into slippery surfaces that required careful navigation. Guards understood that storms provided perfect cover for attackers. The noise masked footsteps, the wind drowned out alarm calls, and darkness deepened beneath the storm clouds. Yet these same storms revealed the silhouettes of trees, tower edges, and distant rocks in sudden bursts of lightning, granting the guards momentary clarity amid the chaos. In winter, the cold sharpened the night into a crystal landscape. Ice formed along the edges of the moat, glinting faintly under the torchlight. Snow muffled sound, making the guards dependent on sight and smell. Their breath created clouds of steam that drifted upward into the air. They wore heavy cloaks lined with fur, yet the chill seeped through the layers. Still, winter offered advantages. Movement across frozen ground produced unmistakable crunches. Footprints in the snow revealed paths taken by animals and humans alike. The guards tracked these signs with attentiveness, knowing that snow revealed everything the night tried to conceal. As the darkest part of the night unfolded, the guards sometimes felt the sensation of being watched in return. Whether from wildlife or the distant presence of travelers, they sensed eyes in the darkness. This feeling sharpened their awareness even more. They tightened their grip on weapons, leaned forward along the parapets, and listened intently. When the feeling passed, they resumed their patrols with quiet satisfaction, acknowledging the presence of unseen forces while maintaining their composure. One of the most intriguing aspects of medieval night defense involved the strategic use of sound as a tool. Guards sometimes created controlled noises to draw out intruders or test areas of concern. For instance, a guard might toss a small stone into the outer ditch, listening for how the sound echoed. If the echo behaved differently than expected, it might indicate the presence of bodies or objects hidden nearby. In other cases, guards deliberately stepped heavily in a certain corner, listening to detect whether anyone else responded. This played an important role during times of persistent threat. In prolonged periods of conflict or tension, guards learned to outthink potential attackers. They altered their patrol patterns unpredictably, ensuring that no one could study their routine. They changed signal codes frequently so that even spies who might overhear them would later find them meaningless. They shifted the locations where torches were placed or removed certain lights entirely to confuse potential observers. Their strategies combined discipline with flexibility, adapting to the flow of events with remarkable skill. At times, the guards also collaborated with scouts who ventured outside the castle during the day. These scouts observed the lands beyond the walls, gathering intelligence that shaped the guards' nighttime decisions. They noted recent activity in nearby villages, the movement of herds, the presence of strangers along the roads. When scouts informed the guards of potential threats, the entire night watch adjusted accordingly. Patrols increased. Torches were managed more conservatively. Silence became even more pronounced. The guards moved with a sharper edge, anticipating the possibility of danger with every breath. Night after night, the castle lived through these cycles, and with each passing night, the guards contributed to a body of experience older than any single watchman. Their stories, though rarely written down, formed a lineage of knowledge that stretched back centuries. Young recruits stepping onto the battlements for the first time stood upon stones shaped by the vigilance of countless men before them. They carried torches in the same holders, watched from the same parapets, stood in the same shadows. In this way, the tradition of night guarding became not just a duty but an inheritance. As the night wore on and the castle entered that faintly unreal threshold between sleeping and waking, the guards felt the atmosphere shift once again. These hours were different from those that had come before. They were quieter, deeper, almost hollow. The world around the fortress seemed to stretch outward, becoming wider and more distant, as though time itself moved more slowly. Within this space, the guards operated with a heightened awareness that came from countless nights of vigilance, discipline, and instinct. Yet despite the familiarity of their routines, each night introduced new possibilities, small changes that shaped the character of the darkness. No two nights ever revealed themselves in the same way. Even subtle variations in the scent of the air or the posture of nearby trees altered the guards' interpretation of the world beyond the walls. These variations kept the guards alert, reminding them that stillness could mask danger or peace in equal measure. One new dimension of night defense that rarely appeared in historical accounts involved the guards' use of the castle's highest towers as night observatories. In certain fortresses, particularly those built on hills or cliffs, watchmen climbed to elevated platforms where the entire countryside revealed itself under the moon. From these heights, the guards could observe movements far beyond the reach of ordinary patrols. They tracked the progress of distant fires, the wandering of livestock across fields, and the subtle shifting of caravans traveling along roads miles away. These observatories became the ultimate vantage points, allowing guards to interpret patterns invisible from lower walls. Atop these towers, the air felt different, thinner, colder, sharper. The wind brushed against the stone with a soft, persistent hiss. Guards learned to lean into this wind, using its direction to gauge changes in the larger environment. Sometimes the wind carried faint echoes from distant villages, a dog barking far away, a late traveler shouting to companions, a wagon rumbling softly along a distant road. Even the faint strike of iron on iron from a remote smithy reached the tower on certain nights. The guards listened to these distant signs, piecing them together into a tapestry of meaning. In especially quiet moments, the night observatories allowed guards to hear something truly rare, silence from far beyond the walls. When villages fell silent earlier than usual, or when distant hills no longer echoed with animal calls, the watchmen took note. Silence, in the grand scale of the medieval countryside, signaled change. Sometimes it meant weather. Sometimes it meant travelers had halted for reasons unknown. Sometimes it meant threats had moved unseen. The guards respected silence as much as sound. Other fortresses incorporated layered signal systems designed exclusively for nighttime communication. These systems allowed guards to coordinate across long distances without revealing their positions. Some castles used dark-colored flares that burned with minimal visible flame, producing only a faint glow recognized by trained watchmen. Others used shielded lanterns that emitted narrow beams of light. By opening and closing shutters in specific patterns, guards communicated news of approaching strangers, suspicious activity, or unusual weather. The surrounding outposts responded in kind, creating a vast silent network that stretched across valleys and along ridgelines. In regions with heavy snowfall, the guards used compact mirrors polished from metal to reflect moonlight toward neighboring towers. These reflections conveyed coded messages that could travel long distances even in deep winter. The guards trained extensively with these mirrors, practicing the movements required to send signals quickly and accurately. Their ability to manipulate light in the darkness became a form of silent language. Beyond the technical aspects of defense, Night Watch also fostered a deeper sense of connection between the guards and the natural world. Many watchmen became experts in identifying nocturnal animals by sound alone. They distinguished foxes from wolves, wild boars from deer, owls from crows. They recognized the rhythm of a hawk settling on a tree branch or the quick flutter of bats weaving through the night sky. These abilities were not hobbies, they were essential skills. When guards knew the behavior of wildlife, they could detect the difference between natural movements and the careful approach of intruders. Some castles kept trained birds that assisted in night surveillance. These birds, mainly owls, were raised near the fortress and grew accustomed to the presence of guards. When strangers approached, the owls reacted differently than when familiar inhabitants moved through the fields. Their sudden flights or alert postures signaled changes in the environment. Guards treated these birds as unspoken allies, watching their movements with quiet appreciation. Inside the fortress, the night entered its own rhythm. While the guards patrolled the battlements and towers, the inner wards remained still. Lanterns burned low in the corridors. The great hall lay dark. The kitchens, which earlier bustled with activity, rested in silence. The servants slept in lofts or small chambers, wrapped in blankets against the nighttime chill. Yet even in this stillness, guards monitored the inner castle with steady resolve. Their patrol routes included the lower vaults where wine and grain were stored, the side chambers where tools and equipment were kept, the long hallways near the sleeping quarters of noble families. Night defense often demanded cooperation between multiple layers of guards. The outer watch monitored the lands beyond the walls. The inner watch protected the corridors and chambers. Meanwhile, a specialized group known in some regions as the Bridge Guard oversaw the drawbridge and portcullis. These guards remained stationed near the gatehouse throughout the night, listening carefully for movement near the moat or the creaking of wooden planks. They inspected the bridge chains to ensure they remained taut and undamaged. They examined the iron gate teeth for signs of tampering. The bridge guards performed one of the most critical roles in the castle. During the night, no gate opened without strict authorization. Even a familiar face approaching the gate required confirmation. Often guards lowered a lantern or torch from the battlements to illuminate the person's face. Only after verbal exchange, signal confirmation, and verification from the captain of the watch did the gates open. Another overlooked but essential aspect of medieval night defense involved the maintenance of the castle's water sources. Many fortresses relied on wells, cisterns, or aqueducts that supplied fresh water for drinking, cooking, and firefighting. Night guards inspected these water sources, checking for signs of contamination or tampering. Enemies sometimes attempted to poison wells or disrupt water supplies to weaken the defenders long before launching a direct attack. Guards took precautions by sealing access points and monitoring the areas closely. In regions where water flowed into the castle through underground channels, guards patrolled the entry points with heightened vigilance. They watched for shifts in water flow that might indicate blockage or sabotage. In some castles, guards listened to the water itself, the soft trickle or gentle rush that echoed through stone channels. If the sound changed even slightly, it suggested something obstructed the flow. These auditory cues helped prevent disasters before they unfolded. One of the most remarkable duties of Night Watch involved the management of the castle's fires. Fire was both essential and dangerous. It provided warmth, light, and the heat needed for cooking and forging. But in a world built largely of timber, fire posed an ever-present threat. Guards patrolled hallways to ensure torches were properly extinguished. They checked hearths to confirm embers were safely contained. They inspected braziers to ensure sparks did not drift into flammable areas. In larger kitchens, guards sometimes stood watch over banked fires that smoldered through the night, ensuring they did not flare unexpectedly. In addition to fires, guards monitored the security of livestock within the outer bailey. Many castles kept animals, horses, sheep, goats, chickens, inside the walls at night. These animals provided essential supplies and served as early warning systems. Sudden agitation among horses alerted guards to disturbances outside the walls. Shepherds who lived near the stables often coordinated with Night Watch to interpret the behavior of the animals. This cooperation emphasized that castle defense was a communal effort, shaped by the combined instincts of people and animals. Some fortresses maintained specialized night traps disguised within the landscape around the walls. These traps varied widely. Some were simple pitfalls concealed by brush or woven branches. Others were trenches filled with sharpened stakes. Guards monitored these traps to ensure they remained hidden and functional. They inspected them after storms to ensure rain had not exposed their positions. They observed the ground around them for signs that animals or intruders had disturbed the coverings. Guard captains trained new recruits to understand these traps thoroughly. Not only did they need to know where the traps were located, they needed to know how to approach them safely and how to notice signs that enemies had studied or modified them. In this way, the traps served both as defensive features and as indicators of unusual activity. While the guards moved through the darkness performing tasks shaped by centuries of tradition, the night also became a time of observation and reflection. Many guards developed a unique relationship with the stars. The constellations provided not only a way to track time, but a source of comfort. Guards who gazed upward felt the vastness of the sky settle their minds, as though the cosmos itself offered companionship. Some guards gave names to constellations based on local legends or personal memories. Others used them as markers that helped them navigate the darkness. The training of night guards included not only practical skills, but also mental conditioning. Guards learned to slow their breathing, steady their thoughts, and maintain calm even in moments of uncertainty. They were taught how to judge distance by sound alone, how to detect movement through peripheral vision, and how to maintain awareness of their surroundings without losing focus on their immediate environment. These skills developed over years, shaped by experience and reinforced by the examples of older watchmen. During the quietest hours of night, the castle sometimes seemed to enter a dreamlike state. The wind softened, the torches burned low, the sky glowed faintly with distant starlight. Guards walking the walls felt as though they moved through a space suspended outside of time, connected to the past through the very stones beneath their feet. They felt the presence of all the guards who had walked the same paths in generations before, men who had seen wars, sieges, triumphs, and sorrows. The continuity of this tradition anchored them, reminding them that their role extended beyond their own lives. Yet despite the familiarity of these routines, each night also presented new factors influenced by shifting landscapes and evolving threats. In coastal regions, tides influenced the behavior of intruders. Low tide exposed sections of coastline that allowed easier passage. High tide concealed rocks and created noise that masked movement. Guards learned to anticipate these changes, timing their patrols according to the rhythm of the sea. During certain tides, boats could approach unseen. During others, the sea offered protection. In mountain fortresses, the temperature shifts brought unique challenges. The air cooled rapidly after sunset, causing frost to form on the battlements. Guards learned to navigate slippery stones, maintaining balance while bearing weapons, lanterns, or horns. The cliffs surrounding these castles produced echoes that could deceive untrained ears. A sound from one direction seemed to originate from another. Guards adapted to these conditions, learning how to interpret echoes with precision. In marshland fortresses, the night air carried thick humidity that clung to cloaks and armor. The cries of frogs mingled with the buzz of insects. The ground beyond the walls held traps of mud and soft earth that could swallow the foot of an unwary traveler. Guards understood the dangers of these terrains intimately. They listened for the unique sound of footsteps moving through mud, a faint suction that revealed the presence of intruders. They watched for the movement of reeds that revealed bodies passing through areas where no wind blew. Whether perched on cliffs, nestled in forests, or rising above plains, each castle shaped the character of its night watch differently. Guards adapted to these environments until their instincts aligned with the land. As another stretch of night passed and the sky remained dark but shifting toward its later hours, the watchmen continued their steady patrol, confident yet cautious, patient yet alert. They were the guardians of the unseen, protectors of the quiet world that slept behind the walls. Through their vigilance, the castle remained secure, standing as a silent testament to the discipline, endurance, and insight of the men who kept watch when all others slept. As dusk fell upon the landscape, the castle's silhouette would darken against the fading light, its walls casting long shadows over the surrounding countryside. The guards would take their positions along the ramparts, the arrow slits, and the gates, ever watchful for signs of movement beyond the perimeter. Their day had already been long, often beginning before sunrise with drills, inspections, and patrols within the courtyard. But the night brought a different rhythm. The senses sharpened, eyes straining in dim moonlight, ears attuned to every rustle in the trees, every distant shout from the valley below. The world seemed quieter, yet more treacherous, for it was in darkness that ambushes were planned and fires set. A castle guard's challenge at night was not merely the threat of attack. The physical demands were immense. Thick leather boots and heavy chainmail weighed upon them, their tunics stiff from wear, while the bitter winds of winter cut through even the most sturdy cloaks. Many castles were perched upon hills or rocky outcrops, and the stone staircases leading to towers were often slick with frost or rain. Guards had to maintain their patrols along these treacherous paths without faltering. One misstep could mean a tumble down the spiral stairs or into the courtyard below. Despite these dangers, the guards moved with purpose and precision, for their vigilance was the barrier between the safety of the Lord and the chaos outside. Illumination was scarce in medieval castles. Torches and braziers cast flickering, uneven light, which danced across walls and created shadows that could deceive the weary eye. Guards relied on their knowledge of the terrain, the sound of their own footsteps on stone, and the subtle cues in the environment to detect intruders. The night was also a time when the castle's animals, the hounds, the horses, and even the occasional nocturnal pests, were restless. A sudden bark or neigh could startle an inexperienced guard, yet the seasoned veteran would remain steady, interpreting each noise within the context of routine. Beyond the physical and sensory challenges, guards faced psychological trials as well. Hours of quiet observation, punctuated only by distant noises and the whisper of wind through battlements, could weigh heavily upon the mind. Many guards spoke in later chronicles of a creeping sense of isolation, a feeling that the walls themselves watched alongside them, silent witnesses to every twitch of shadow or distant gleam of torchlight. It was this solitude that demanded not only vigilance but inner discipline, the ability to remain alert even when the mind longed for sleep. The organization of the watch was crucial. A castle might be divided into sectors, each assigned to a small group of guards, with rotations to ensure that no one grew too fatigued. Communication between watch posts was subtle but precise, clanging a small bell, blowing a horn, or signaling with lanterns. Such signals had to be concise and clear, for miscommunication in the dark could be disastrous. A false alarm might mobilize the entire garrison unnecessarily, while a missed warning could open the gates to invaders. Nighttime attacks, though relatively infrequent compared to daytime sieges, were a genuine concern. Raiders often preferred darkness, using the cover of night to scale walls, approach gates quietly, or infiltrate via hidden paths known only to locals or scouts. Guards had to anticipate such strategies, drawing upon maps, previous skirmishes, and their understanding of the surrounding terrain. In some cases, they employed clever devices, caltrops scattered along likely approaches, hidden pits, or barricades reinforced with sharpened stakes. Observation towers were often built higher than the walls themselves, providing a vantage point to spot flickers of movement far across the valley below. The human element added another layer of complexity. Not all castle guards were seasoned soldiers. Many were young men serving their first tour of duty, others elderly veterans past the prime of their years. Within the ranks, morale was a constant concern. Stories passed down through generations spoke of guards who would take shifts in pairs, sharing tales to stay awake and alert, or sing quietly to maintain focus during the longest watches. Discipline was strict, for lapses could result in punishment, yet camaraderie was the glue that held the night watch together, a quiet reassurance that they were not alone against the dangers lurking beyond the walls. Beyond defending against intruders, guards also had to protect the castle from internal hazards. Fires, for instance, posed a catastrophic risk. Kitchens and torches could easily ignite wooden structures, and a blaze at night could spread unnoticed until it was too late. Guards often carried buckets, water, or sand, and kept their ears attuned to the subtle crackle or scent of smoke. Their vigilance was not only martial but practical, for the survival of the fortress depended on preventing disaster from both man and nature. Weather itself was an adversary. Storms could rage across the hills, lightning illuminating the courtyard for brief moments before plunging it back into darkness. Rain could make walls slippery and mud bog down horses and soldiers alike. Snow muffled sounds, making distant steps harder to hear, while wind could carry echoes that confused even the most practiced ears. Guards adapted to each condition, adjusting their patrols, leaning against walls to steady themselves, and relying on routines honed over years of experience. The tools and weapons of the night watch were simple yet effective. Swords, spears, and bows were kept within reach, often sharpened and oiled before the beginning of each shift. Some guards carried lanterns or small torches to illuminate their immediate surroundings, while others relied purely on night vision developed through experience. Dogs were sometimes used as additional sentries, trained to bark at strangers or even attack on command. Bells and horns served as a network of warnings, allowing the defenders to coordinate quickly if a threat emerged. One of the most dangerous challenges was the human unpredictability within the castle walls. Guards had to be cautious even of fellow residents, for betrayal and conspiracy were not unheard of. A traitor in the night could unlock gates, mislead watchmen, or sow confusion to facilitate an attack. The training of a guard thus extended beyond physical readiness to include acute observation of human behavior, subtle interrogation skills, and the ability to recognize suspicious activity before it escalated into disaster. Historical records often recount incidents where a single guard's vigilance prevented catastrophe. A minor disturbance, such as a shadow crossing the outer walls, a rope thrown over a battlement, or an unfamiliar figure lingering near a gate, could trigger a rapid response that thwarted entire raiding parties. In these moments, the combination of discipline, experience, and instinct transformed ordinary men into the guardians of the castle, ensuring that their lord and the inhabitants slept safely through the night. Yet it was not all tension and danger. Night Watch also held moments of solemn beauty. The moon rising over the towers, the distant glow of fires in the valleys, and the gentle rustle of trees in the breeze created a landscape that was both serene and foreboding. Guards often described walking the ramparts at night as a meditative experience, a time when they felt intimately connected to the stones, the battlements, and the history of the fortress itself. Each stone had a story, each tower a witness to countless past events, and the guards, for a few hours each night, became part of that ongoing narrative. As centuries passed, the roles and methods of castle guards evolved with technology and tactics. Castles were fortified with more sophisticated mechanisms, drawbridges, murder holes, and reinforced gates, but the essence of the Night Watch remained unchanged: alertness, discipline, and courage. Some fortresses adopted more elaborate signaling systems, using lights, smoke, or even trained birds to communicate over long distances. Yet even in the most advanced medieval castles, it was still the human guard who observed, interpreted, and acted, for no machine could replace the intuition developed through years of experience. And so, as the night deepened and the world outside the walls slumbered, the castle guards continued their ceaseless vigilance. Each hour passed in quiet tension, each sound and shadow weighed with potential significance. When dawn finally broke, they would descend from the ramparts, weary but steadfast, knowing that they had once again preserved the fortress from unseen dangers. Their work was often uncelebrated, their bravery unnoticed, yet their role was essential, a silent testament to the enduring human spirit in the face of darkness and uncertainty. Every castle guard of the medieval age, whether stationed in a remote tower overlooking a misty valley or within a bustling citadel at the heart of a town, shared a common purpose: to protect, to observe, and to ensure that the fortress, the home of their lord and the lives of countless innocents within, remained secure through the night. Their legacy, preserved in chronicles, songs, and tales passed down through generations, speaks not only of martial skill, but of the quiet courage required to stand watch when the world sleeps and danger lurks unseen. As the sun's first light crept over the horizon, casting a soft golden hue upon the castle walls, the night watch did not end abruptly. For many guards, the transition from night to day was gradual, a careful unwinding of tension, a measured descent from the heightened alertness of the nocturnal vigil to the more predictable routines of daylight. The early morning hours were often the quietest, yet they held their own hazards. Mist could cling to the courtyard and outer walls, disguising uneven stones, slippery moss, and hidden holes in the terrain. Even seasoned guards had to move carefully, lest a misstep cause injury or alert an enemy to their vulnerability. Beyond physical challenges, the end of the night watch brought introspection. Guards often reflected upon the events of the previous hours, the fleeting shadow glimpsed from the tower, the soft murmur of distant voices, or the sudden clang of a bell that had sent their hearts racing. These moments became a mental ledger of vigilance, a catalog of potential threats and lessons learned. Over time, guards developed an almost instinctive understanding of the castle's rhythms, the patterns of natural sounds, and even the habits of nocturnal animals that might otherwise be mistaken for intruders. Winter nights, in particular, were merciless. Snow and ice could render the battlements treacherous, while freezing winds penetrated the thickest armor and the warmest cloak. Guards stationed in towers often relied on the heat of braziers, but even these offered limited comfort. Cold could numb fingers, slow reactions, and dull perception, yet vigilance could not waver. Some castles employed rotating shifts more frequently during harsh weather, allowing guards brief periods of warmth, while others relied on sheer endurance and the cultivation of mental resilience. Tales abound of guards who, despite frostbite and fatigue, remained at their posts because the threat of a silent incursion was ever present. Another constant challenge was the management of human needs under duress. Guards had to contend with hunger, thirst, and exhaustion, yet abandoning a post for even a short time could leave a gap in the fortress's defenses. Many fortresses maintained small storage rooms along the walls, stocked with water, bread, and dried meat, allowing guards to take brief, minimal sustenance breaks without compromising their watch. Others developed subtle hand signals and rotations, so that a small group could relieve each other briefly, while the rest remained alert. The efficiency and coordination required in these moments could determine whether the fortress survived an unexpected attack. Some nights were punctuated by the faint glimmer of approaching strangers. Scouts or travelers from distant villages might wander too close to the walls, their intentions unknown. Guards had to be quick to investigate without inciting unnecessary conflict. The balance between caution and prudence was delicate. A hasty confrontation could provoke violence, while hesitation could allow real danger to breach the defenses. Over time, the guards became adept at reading intentions, judging the gait, posture, and even the breath of those who ventured near, a skill honed through countless hours of observation in darkness. Yet perhaps the greatest danger was that which could not be seen: internal dissent. Loyalty within the castle was not always absolute. Peasants, servants, or even fellow guards could be coerced, bribed, or persuaded to act against the lord. Guards were trained to notice anomalies, from missing tools to unusual conversations, to subtle changes in behavior. The castle was not merely a stone structure to be defended against external enemies. It was a living organism of human relations, and the night watch was as much a social vigilance as a martial one. Stories of betrayal are woven deeply into the chronicles of medieval castles. There are accounts of secret tunnels used by conspirators, of false alarms raised to draw guards away, and of messages smuggled under the cover of darkness to coordinate attacks from within and without. In response, castles developed intricate patrol systems, combining random and scheduled rounds, ensuring that no guard could predict the exact timing of inspection. Towers and walls were designed to allow lines of sight between posts, creating a network of mutual surveillance that functioned as both deterrent and early warning system. Training for night watch was rigorous and ongoing. A young recruit might spend weeks learning the layout of the fortress, memorizing each staircase, turret, and gate, until movement could be made in near silence. They practiced silently drawing their swords, communicating with signals, and maintaining balance on wet or uneven stone. Seasoned guards trained the novices, often telling stories that doubled as moral lessons, cautionary tales, or practical demonstrations of what could go wrong if discipline failed. This training extended to handling the unexpected: sudden skirmishes, fires, flooding, or even pest infestations that could disrupt the night's vigilance. Despite the ever-present dangers, night watch was sometimes interrupted by moments of unexpected human kindness or camaraderie. Guards would share stories of home, recounting past battles or distant fields of their childhood. Music, softly hummed or played on a small instrument, occasionally eased the tension, reminding them of life beyond the battlements. These moments, fleeting as they were, helped sustain morale, offering brief respite from the constant awareness of potential danger. The psychological aspect of the night watch cannot be overstated. Hours spent alone in watchtowers or along desolate walls cultivated a heightened sense of perception. Guards often reported seeing things others missed or hearing sounds that seemed imperceptible to casual ears. Their instincts became sharpened, almost preternatural, a blend of training, experience, and the subtle influence of fear. Yet fear, if not managed, could be as dangerous as any external threat. It required discipline to temper adrenaline, to maintain clarity and purpose, even when every instinct screamed to flee or strike. There were also natural threats beyond the enemy and human error. Storms could devastate the walls, landslides could threaten outer defenses, and rivers swelling from rain could flood moats and undermine foundations. Guards had to be aware of environmental changes, interpreting signs in the wind, clouds, and water. Their vigilance extended to the infrastructure itself. A weakened section of wall, a gate creaking under strain, or a rope fraying on a drawbridge could become vulnerabilities exploited by enemies if left unattended. In this way, guards functioned as both sentinels and caretakers, ensuring that the fortress itself remained resilient. Occasionally, the night brought direct confrontation, raiding parties, opportunistic thieves, or rival lords seeking advantage might strike under cover of darkness. In such moments, the training, discipline, and coordination of the guards were tested to the utmost. Archers on battlements unleashed arrows with precision, infantry secured the gates, and horns and bells signaled reinforcements. Often, success depended on anticipation as much as reaction. A guard who noticed subtle signs, footprints in the mud, a displaced stone, or the glint of metal in the moonlight, could turn the tide of an encounter before the enemy realized they had been discovered. The toll of these confrontations, even minor skirmishes, was significant. Guards bore injuries, the exhaustion of extended vigilance, and the mental strain of constant alertness. Yet the camaraderie and shared purpose bound them together. Each guard knew that their companions relied upon them just as they relied upon others. The fortress was more than stone and mortar. It was a collective human effort, a shared endeavor where every small action contributed to the survival of the whole. Over time, chroniclers noted that some guards developed legendary reputations. Stories of individuals who single-handedly held a gate against multiple assailants, or who detected infiltrators with uncanny intuition, became part of the oral history of the castle. These accounts, passed down for generations, reinforced the ideals of vigilance, courage, and dedication that defined the night watch. Guards became symbols not only of martial prowess, but of steadfastness in the face of uncertainty, their names whispered with respect long after their service ended. As twilight descended once more, the castle walls grew shadowed and silent, save for the occasional cry of a distant owl or the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Within the fortress, life moved in hushed rhythms. The kitchens prepared the last meals of the day, candles flickered along corridors, and families retired to their chambers. Meanwhile, the castle guards readied themselves, donning armor, checking weapons, and moving into positions that had been practiced countless times. The night watch was about to begin anew, a ritual as old as the stone walls themselves. One of the greatest challenges for a guard was the unpredictability of night. No two nights were ever alike. On some, the hours passed quietly, the patrols routine, the horizon empty of movement. On others, the tranquility was shattered by sudden threats, an approaching enemy band, a desperate villager seeking refuge, or the subtle evidence of an intruder attempting to scale the walls under the cover of darkness. Every night demanded adaptability, alertness, and the ability to make rapid decisions under pressure. The guards' work often began at the outermost defenses, the curtain walls, towers, and gates. Here, vigilance was paramount. The approach to a castle was often guarded by natural obstacles, moats, rocky hills, dense forests, but these could be circumvented by skilled or determined intruders. Guards relied not only on sharp eyes but on their deep familiarity with the terrain, listening for disturbances in the wind, echoes that did not belong, or footprints hidden beneath dust or snow. In some castles, sentries would even station themselves in trees or along hidden ridges, a layer of defense designed to catch those who thought the walls provided total security. Communication between guards was crucial during the night. A castle might extend over several acres, and a threat spotted in one tower needed to be relayed immediately to the rest of the garrison. Bells, horns, and lantern signals became the language of the night, subtle and precise, honed to avoid false alarms while ensuring rapid response. In some fortresses, complex systems of visual signals, reflecting moonlight off polished metal, or using smoke from small fires, enabled messages to travel astonishing distances in mere minutes. It was a dance of observation and coordination, and one mistake could be disastrous. Perhaps the most insidious challenges were those of fatigue and monotony. Night after night, guards would patrol the same walls, climb the same towers, and repeat the same circuits. Even the most disciplined soldiers felt the creeping weight of weariness, which dulled perception and slowed reaction time. To combat this, some castles instituted rotating shifts, allowing brief periods of rest while ensuring coverage. Others relied on small rituals, packing in measured steps, running drills, or silently rehearsing defensive maneuvers to remain alert. These routines transformed tedium into vigilance, turning endurance into a weapon against the fatigue that could otherwise compromise the fortress's defenses. Weather was a constant and unpredictable adversary. Heavy rains turned courtyards into mud, snow hid hazards in the battlements, and icy winds cut through armor and cloaks alike. Storms could obscure the approach of enemies, but they also made it difficult for guards to maintain footing on wet stone or hear subtle sounds in the darkness. Lightning illuminated the walls briefly, revealing the landscape in stark relief, only to plunge it back into blackness, heightening tension and disorientation. Yet through it all, the guards remained steadfast, their training and experience guiding them as much as courage or instinct. Inside the castle, the Night Watch was not only about protecting against external threats. Fires posed a constant danger. A kitchen fire or a candle knocked over could ignite timber and thatch, spreading rapidly if unnoticed. Guards were trained to identify signs of smoke or unusual heat, and in many cases, small buckets of water or sand were kept along walls for immediate response. The threat of disease, animal infestations, and structural collapse added layers of responsibility. Being a guard meant vigilance not only against human enemies, but against the hidden perils that could arise silently within the fortress itself. Human behavior introduced complexities that even the most experienced guards had to navigate. Within the castle, disputes among servants, tensions between soldiers, or disagreements among family members could escalate unpredictably. A guard needed not only martial skill, but judgment, diplomacy, and the ability to read subtle signs of unrest. History is replete with stories of night watches disrupted not by armies, but by quarrels that escalated into violence or panic. Maintaining peace and order within the walls was as vital as defending them against external forces. Some of the most dramatic moments occurred during attempted infiltrations. Raiders, scouts, or rival lords would exploit the cover of darkness, hopping to bypass gates or scale walls unnoticed. Guards developed techniques to counter these strategies: hidden pits, sharpened stakes, traps disguised under foliage, and careful observation of likely approaches. Archers on the walls, ready with arrows, watched every shadow for a telltale glint of metal or movement. In many cases, the vigilance of a single guard detected the threat before it became critical, highlighting the immense responsibility each individual bore. The psychological aspect of the Night Watch was profound. Hours spent in solitude or in the dim light of torches sharpened awareness, but also amplified the imagination. Shadows could appear as enemies, wind as footsteps, and distant sounds as signals of impending danger. Guards learned to temper fear with training and reason, to interpret sensory information accurately, and to rely on collective experience. Stories passed from one generation to the next reinforced these lessons, offering practical guidance as well as moral encouragement. A reminder that courage was not the absence of fear, but the discipline to act despite it. Over time, the routines of the Night Watch became ritualized. Each castle had its own traditions, shaped by architecture, location, and the personalities of its leaders. Guards learned the rhythms of each tower, the patterns of moonlight on the walls, and the subtleties of sound carried across courtyards. These rituals were not mere habit, they were life-saving, transforming the ordinary into a finely tuned system of defense that relied on human observation, intuition, and judgment. Some nights brought extraordinary events. A sudden attack might erupt without warning, testing every skill and every plan. Archers fired from battlements, infantry defended gates, and signals brought reinforcements from distant towers. Stories of such nights abound in historical chronicles. The young guard who sounded the alarm just in time, the veteran who held a wall against overwhelming odds, the strategic use of boiling oil or hidden crossbows to repel invaders. Each incident became part of the living memory of the fortress, reinforcing the lessons of vigilance, teamwork, and the fine line between survival and catastrophe. Yet amidst these dangers, the night also held moments of quiet reflection and awe. The moon casting silver light across towers, the distant glimmer of fires in villages beyond the walls, the silent stars overhead, all offered reminders of a world beyond the fortress. Guards, in their solitude, often reflected on these vistas, finding in them a sense of purpose and continuity. They were part of a lineage, the custodians of stone and memory, linking past generations to the present through the act of watchfulness. As centuries passed, technological advancements transformed aspects of the night watch, but the essence remained unchanged. Drawbridges, reinforced gates, and early warning systems enhanced defense, yet no device could replace the trained eye and disciplined mind of a guard. The human factor, the judgment, intuition, and courage, remained at the core of castle defense. Even in the most fortified fortresses, a lapse in vigilance could be disastrous, and thus the principles established in the early medieval period endured. Eventually, historical accounts emphasize the cumulative effect of these efforts. Night after night, guard after guard, the fortresses survived not simply because of walls or weapons, but because of the discipline, skill, and resilience of those assigned to watch them. Tales of heroic defense, quiet endurance, and meticulous vigilance shaped the reputation of castles as impregnable fortresses. They were not only bastions of stone, but embodiments of human dedication and courage. Summary: the night watch in medieval castles was a complex interplay of discipline, courage, skill, and human endurance. Guards faced a multitude of challenges: external threats from raiders and armies, internal dangers from betrayal or accident, environmental hazards from weather and terrain, and the ever-present strain of fatigue and solitude. They relied on training, experience, coordination, and intuition to maintain vigilance and protect the lives and property within the fortress walls. Beyond defense, the night watch fostered camaraderie, reflection, and a profound connection to the history and legacy of the castle itself. Through all these trials, the guards exemplified resilience, courage, and steadfastness. Their vigilance ensured the safety of those within the fortress, safeguarded the legacy of their lords, and contributed to the enduring mystique of the medieval castle. The stories of their perseverance, often unsung, sometimes legendary, offer a window into a world where the night demanded not only skill, but the enduring strength of the human spirit. Thank you for watching and journeying with me through the history of medieval castle guards and their nocturnal vigilance. If you enjoyed this exploration, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you won't miss future historical narratives, and share this story with anyone who appreciates calm, immersive history. Your support helps keep these tales alive and brings the past vividly into the present.